The wind shrieked through the rows of gravestones, bending the old oak trees as if nature itself mourned. Rain lashed against Daniel's face, soaking his coat as he trudged up the cemetery path, his boots sinking into the mud. He adjusted his flashlight, its weak beam flickering against the storm's fury. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, hugging himself against the cold. Covering local legends wasn't his usual beat, but an old police officer's funeral, followed by a dog's refusal to leave, had drawn attention. His editor insisted there was a story here. Daniel wasn't convinced. A sudden gust rattled the iron gates behind him, sending a sharp clang through the night. He ignored it, until he heard it. A faint whimper, barely audible over the howling wind. He stopped. The sound came again, carried by the storm. A small, broken noise of something alive, something suffering. Daniel turned, sweeping his flashlight over the rows of headstones, the rain distorting his vision. And then, through the downpour, he saw it. A German shepherd, soaked to the bone, sat unmoving beside a fresh grave. Water dripped from its matted fur, its ears flat against its head. It didn't shiver, didn't cower, it just sat, silent, staring, as if the world around it didn't exist. Daniel frowned. Stray dogs didn't behave like this. They ran, they sought shelter. They didn't sit in the storm, guarding the dead. He stepped closer, the flashlight catching the smooth marble of the tombstone. Henry Thompson, retired police officer, 1952 to 2024. A man of honor and courage. Daniel exhaled sharply. He remembered the obituary. Henry Thompson had served the city for decades, known for his integrity and dedication. He had died of a heart attack just days ago. Rumors had spread quickly about his partner, a loyal German shepherd named Max, who had refused to leave his side even after death. A voice called from the chapel steps. Daniel turned to see an older man, the cemetery keeper, watching him from under the shelter of the church awning. He shook his head, rain running off the brim of his hat. "That dog's been here since the funeral," the man said. "Won't budge. We tried to move him, bring him inside. He fought us. Keeps coming back." Daniel looked down at Max, whose eyes never left the tombstone. Loyalty. That's all this was. A dog clinging to what was familiar. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. It's just an attachment. He was trained to stay close to his partner. This is grief, not some ghost story. The old man didn't argue. Maybe. He looked up at the storm. But people say dogs see things we don't. Daniel gave a half smirk. People say a lot of things. And yet, Max suddenly stood, his soaked fur bristling. His ears twitched, his body rigid. He was listening to something Daniel couldn't hear. A low growl rumbled from Max's throat. Daniel stiffened. A prickle ran down his spine, an instinctive, primal reaction. The air around him felt charged, heavy, as if something unseen pressed against the night just beyond the reach of his flashlight's beam. He turned slowly, scanning the graves, the trees, the shifting shadows. Nothing. Just rain and darkness. And yet, he felt it. Max did too. The dog took a step forward, his growl deepening, his body tense as if bracing for something unseen. Daniel swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the flashlight. For the first time that night, he wasn't sure if he was alone. Daniel knelt on the damp earth, his fingers curling slightly as he extended his hand toward Max. The German shepherd sat still, his dark eyes locked onto something beyond Daniel's sight. The night air was thick with mist, swirling around the gravestones like silent whispers. "Come on, boy," Daniel coaxed, his voice soft but insistent. "It's late. Let's get you home." Max didn't move. His ears twitched at the sound of Daniel's voice, but his paws remained planted on the ground, muscles tense beneath his shaggy fur. The dog wasn't just sitting, he was waiting. Daniel followed Max's gaze into the darkness, but all he saw were rows of silent headstones stretching into the mist. A shiver ran down his spine. Why was Max so fixated on this place? The crunch of boots on gravel made Daniel turn. The graveyard keeper, an older man with sunken eyes and a lantern swinging from his hand, approached slowly. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze shifting between Daniel and Max. "That dog's been here every night," the keeper murmured, adjusting the collar of his worn-out coat. "People say he's waiting." Daniel scoffed, glancing back at Max. Waiting for what? The keeper's gaze darkened. Not what. Who? Something about the way he said it made Daniel uneasy. He tried to shake it off, but as the keeper turned and disappeared into the night, his words lingered in the heavy air like an unspoken warning. Curiosity gnawed at Daniel. He wasn't one to believe in ghost stories, but Max's unwavering presence by the gravesite unsettled him. Instead of leaving, Daniel climbed into his car, parking just outside the cemetery gates. He adjusted his seat, peering through the fogged-up windshield. The graveyard lay silent, shrouded in darkness. Max sat motionless, his fur blending into the night. What was he waiting for? Who had he lost? The clock on the dashboard ticked past 11. Daniel's eyelids grew heavy, but just as he was about to doze off, a low growl snapped him back to attention. The graveyard had changed. The stillness was gone, replaced by something else, a presence. Max jolted upright, barking wildly, his body rigid with tension. His deep, guttural growls echoed through the empty rows of graves. Daniel's pulse quickened. He threw open the car door, stepping into the cool night air. The mist had thickened, curling around the tombstones like ghostly fingers. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, his breath visible in the cold. Max barked again, his gaze locked on Henry's grave, Daniel's grandfather. The air suddenly felt heavy, charged with something unseen but undeniably real. Daniel took a cautious step forward, his flashlight flickering to life. The beam of light cut through the fog, landing on something that made his stomach drop. Footprints, fresh ones, leading up to Henry's grave. His heart pounded as he scanned the area, but there was no one in sight. The graveyard was empty, or at least it should have been. A chill ran down his spine. He turned to Max, who was now growling deep in his throat, ears pinned back, eyes locked onto the disturbed earth near the headstone. Then, without warning, Max lunged. Dirt flew into the air as Max's paws tore at the ground. His movements were frantic, driven by something primal. Daniel rushed forward, grabbing at the dog's collar, but Max wouldn't stop. He barked, whined, and dug as if something beneath the earth was calling to him. Daniel hesitated, then dropped to his knees beside Max, brushing away loose dirt with trembling fingers. The ground was softer than it should have been, like it had been disturbed recently. Then his fingers brushed against something solid, something that shouldn't have been there. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as realization dawned. His grandfather had been buried here years ago. No one should have touched this grave. And yet, here it was, freshly turned earth, a disturbed grave. Max whimpered, pressing his body close to Daniel's side. Something was very, very wrong. The wind howled through the cemetery, carrying a chilling reminder of the approaching winter. Daniel adjusted his coat, his gaze falling upon the German shepherd curled beside Henry's grave. Max hadn't moved in days, his loyalty unwavering. Something about the sight made Daniel pause. He sighed, shaking his head. "You're just a dog," he muttered, more to himself than to Max. But as he turned to leave, he hesitated. His hand reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the granola bar he always carried. He crouched down, placing it gently on the grass. Max didn't move, but his ears twitched, a flicker of acknowledgement. Daniel left without another word, but the next day he found the granola bar gone, and beside Henry's tombstone, Max remained, steadfast and silent. The more Daniel visited the cemetery, the more he found himself drawn to Max. Curiosity got the better of him, and he began asking around about the dog's past. What he learned left him speechless. Henry had been more than just a police officer. He had been a K-9 handler, and Max had been his partner. Their story was one of survival, forged in the fire of an undercover mission gone wrong. Henry had saved Max as a pup, pulling him from the wreckage of a criminal hideout. In return, Max had saved Henry countless times. They were more than just a team, they were family. Daniel swallowed hard. Henry had no children, no spouse, just this dog mourning by his grave. Max wasn't simply loyal, he was grieving. Daniel had assumed Max never left Henry's grave. But one evening, as he walked past the cemetery's iron gate, he noticed something peculiar. Max was moving. The dog paced along the headstones, nose low, muscles tense. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, ears twitching at the slightest sound. It wasn't the aimless wandering of a lost soul. Max was patrolling, watching, protecting. Daniel frowned. Was he guarding Henry's grave, or something else? That night, curiosity gnawed at him. He decided to stay. A rustling noise snapped Daniel awake. His breath hitched as he squinted through the dim light. Max stood motionless, eyes locked onto a shadowy figure near Henry's grave. A jolt of unease shot through Daniel. He rose slowly, careful not to startle the dog. Max's fur bristled, his body tense, ready to pounce. Daniel took a cautious step forward. "Hey, who's there?" The figure turned abruptly and vanished into the woods beyond the cemetery. Max bolted forward, but stopped at the tree line, letting out a low, warning growl. Daniel's heart pounded. This wasn't just an animal's grief. This was vigilance. Something, or someone, had been watching Henry's grave. The next morning, Daniel returned with a fresh sense of purpose. Max wasn't just a dog mourning his handler. He was searching for something, or someone. He knelt beside Max, running a hand through the dog's thick fur. "What are you trying to tell me?" Max's ears perked. Slowly, he trotted toward a nearby bush, his nose working furiously. Daniel followed, crouching as Max began digging. A metallic glint caught his eye. A dog tag, half buried in the dirt. Henry's. Daniel's breath hitched. How had it ended up here? His fingers closed around the cold metal as realization settled in. Max wasn't just mourning. He was leading Daniel toward a truth buried deeper than Henry's grave. Max trotted ahead, his ears perked and nose twitching as he led Daniel to an old rusted storage locker on the outskirts of town. Daniel's pulse quickened. This was Henry's, his mentor's, locker. He slid the key into the lock, hands trembling. The door creaked open, revealing stacks of yellowed files and a battered metal box. Max sniffed at it, whining softly. Daniel pried it open, uncovering police reports, photos, and handwritten notes. His breath caught. These weren't just old case files. These were secrets Henry had hidden for years. Secrets someone had killed him for. Max growled slowly, sensing his partner's unease. Daniel flipped through the papers, his stomach nodding. These documents detailed something far bigger than he had imagined. Henry hadn't just been looking into old cases, he had been hunting someone. Someone dangerous. And now, that danger was staring Daniel in the face. Daniel's hands shook as he scanned the documents. One case stood out. An unsolved disappearance from 15 years ago. The victim? A young woman who had vanished without a trace. The suspect, a high-ranking officer who had never been charged. Henry had never stopped investigating, even after the case went cold. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Henry had gotten too close, and it had cost him his life. Max whined, nudging his leg, sensing the shift in Daniel's mood. He inhaled sharply, gripping the file. This wasn't just about justice anymore, it was personal. Henry had died trying to expose the truth. Daniel wasn't about to let his death be in vain. As he stood to leave, a chill ran down his spine. Someone had wanted these files buried, and now they knew Daniel had them. Daniel's apartment was dark when he returned, too dark. Max stiffened, his ears twitching. Something was off. He reached for his gun, inching toward the living room. Then he saw it, the mess. Papers scattered across the floor, drawers pulled open. A warning, someone had been here. Max sniffed the air, then growled, his body tense. Daniel clenched his fists. They weren't just watching him anymore, they were coming for him. He crouched, scanning the floor. The files were gone. His heart pounded. The only evidence he had, stolen right from under him. But they had underestimated one thing, Max. The dog barked sharply, tail rigid. He darted to the back door, nose to the ground before looking back at Daniel with urgency. They weren't alone. Daniel grabbed his gun just as a shadow moved outside the window. The fight was coming. The first blow came fast, a masked figure lunging from the darkness. Daniel barely dodged, stumbling back as another attacker rushed in. Max sprang into action, his deep growl cutting through the chaos. He lunged at the nearest intruder, teeth sinking into a gloved arm. The man screamed, trying to shake him off, but Max held firm. Daniel swung his fist, connecting with a jaw, but a second attacker tackled him to the ground. A fist slammed into his ribs. Pain exploded through his side. Max barked furiously, letting go of his attacker and charging at the second man. Daniel seized the moment, elbowing his assailant and scrambling to his feet. The masked men cursed, realizing they were outmatched. Max bared his teeth, standing protectively in front of Daniel. The men fled into the night, but the message was clear. They wanted him dead. And now, he wanted answers. Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath as Max pressed against him, his body still tense. Blood dripped from his lip, but he barely felt it. The truth crashed down on him. Henry's death wasn't an accident. Someone had made sure he never spoke again. Max whimpered, nudging Daniel's hand. He ran his fingers through the dog's fur, grounding himself. Whoever had sent those men wasn't finished. Henry had spent years chasing a ghost, and now that ghost was coming for Daniel. He closed his eyes, piecing it together. Henry had known the truth, and now so did he. There was only one person with the power to cover this up, to manipulate the system to kill without consequence. And if Max's reaction was any sign, Daniel had just figured out who it was. Max led Daniel through the dimly lit precinct, his nose to the ground. The dog's hackles rose as they approached an office door. Daniel's stomach twisted. He pushed it open. Behind the desk sat a man he had once trusted, Henry's old partner, Captain Reynolds. Max growled lowly, his stance rigid. Reynolds smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You should have let it go, Daniel." Daniel's hands clenched. "You killed Henry." Reynolds sighed, almost bored. "Henry dug too deep, just like you." Max's growl deepened, his teeth bared. The dog remembered him. Daniel's heart pounded. He had no backup, no proof, just a loyal dog and the truth. But sometimes that was enough. Max lunged as Daniel reached for his weapon. It was time to finish what Henry started, time to bring the truth to light. The courtroom fell silent as the final piece of evidence was presented, the surveillance footage that showed the corrupt officer tampering with Henry's records. Gasps rippled through the gallery, and the judge's gavel came down with decisive authority. Officer Reynolds, you are hereby placed under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud. Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him. The battle had been long, but Henry's name was finally cleared. The community, once skeptical, now rallied behind the truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, but Daniel's gaze was fixed on Max. The dog sat still, his amber eyes reflecting something deeper than mere victory, peace. As if he understood, Max nudged Daniel's hand, a silent thank you. Justice had come at last, and with it, an end to the ghost of past injustices. The cemetery was quiet, the evening breeze whispering through the trees. Max lay beside Henry's grave, his massive frame no longer restless, no longer searching. He wasn't a mourner, he was a guardian who had fulfilled his duty. Daniel approached, kneeling beside him. You did it, buddy. He can rest now, and so can you. Max let out a long sigh, his body finally relaxing. For weeks, he had stood vigil, protecting a memory, demanding justice. Now, with Henry's name restored, he simply laid there, no longer bound by grief or uncertainty. Daniel ran a hand through Max's fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. You don't have to stay here anymore. Let's go home. For the first time since Henry's death, Max didn't resist. He looked up at Daniel, eyes full of understanding, and followed him away from the grave. Daniel had never planned on adopting a dog, but some bonds weren't planned. They were simply meant to be. Max's paws patted across the wooden floor of Daniel's small home, sniffing, exploring. It wasn't the place he had once called home with Henry, but it felt right. Daniel watched him settle by the fireplace, stretching out in a way that spoke of newfound comfort. This was always meant to happen, wasn't it? He murmured, more to himself than to Max. The dog lifted his head, tilting it slightly, as if agreeing. Daniel chuckled, kneeling beside him. Guess we both needed a fresh start. Shh. Max leaned into his touch, a quiet confirmation of trust. They weren't just two lost souls crossing paths. They were a family, built from loss but bound by something stronger, love, loyalty, and the unspoken promise of a new beginning. The cemetery keeper had grown used to Max's nightly vigils. The dog would arrive at dusk, standing beside Henry's grave as if waiting for something. It had been this way for weeks, but tonight something was different. As the moon cast silver light over the tombstones, Max was nowhere in sight. Instead, he lay peacefully at Daniel's feet in their home, finally sleeping through the night. The keeper smiled, shaking his head. Looks like he finally found what he was looking for. At Daniel's house, Max let out a soft, contented sigh in his sleep. His mission was complete. The man he had once protected was at peace, and so was he. His silent watch had ended, but his story, the story of unwavering loyalty, would live on forever. Max lay beside Henry's grave, his eyes half closed, his breaths slow and steady. The world moved on, but for Max, time stood still here, beside the man who had once saved him. Some said he mourned, but it was deeper than that. Love had no boundaries, no end. Even in death, Henry's presence lingered in the quiet rustle of leaves, in the scent of old leather from his jacket still tucked in Max's new home. Their bond wasn't broken by loss. It had merely transformed, becoming something eternal. Henry had died searching for justice, and for years his story had been buried beneath lies. But truth has a way of surfacing, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. The corrupt officer was behind bars now, and Henry's name was cleared. His fight had not been in vain. As Daniel looked at Max, he realized something. The dog had never just been keeping vigil. He had been waiting for the world to see what Henry had always known. Daniel ran a hand through Max's thick fur. The dog, once burdened by grief, now leaned into his touch, his tail wagging ever so slightly. Henry had saved Max once, and in the end, Max had saved Henry's truth. Now it was Daniel's turn. He hadn't just adopted a dog, he had found a purpose, a reminder that love, loyalty, and second chances were never coincidences. Sometimes the ones we rescue end up rescuing us in ways we never see coming.